Hello and welcome to today's podcast on the topic of preparing for customer disruption in 2020 and beyond. I have an all-star panel of thought leaders in the customer contact industry here with me today, and I'm your host, Frances Quinn, the founder of Athena Consulting. So I'm going to throw over to Greg so he can introduce himself.
Thanks, Frances. Good to be here. This is exciting. So I run Tanner Partners, which is an executive search practice focusing on the customer experience industry. So I've been doing that for about 20 years now. I know Fiona, I know Les, so all the stayers in the industry. So it's going to be interesting today. I'm looking forward to this discussion.
So am I. Thank you, Greg. Fiona, over to you.
Thanks, Frances, for the opportunity to be here. Knowing you as long as I have, but we're not going to say how many years. I'm CEO of AusContact, which is the Contact Centre Association for Australia, and any of you with contact centres should belong.
Thanks, Fiona. Les?
Good afternoon all. Les Reid. I'm Head of Global Sales at LivePro. We are a knowledge management software developer and retailer globally. I've also been in the industry, and thank you very much, Greg, saying I'm a stayer. We're all stayers. 20 plus years. So hopefully I can bring something to the conversation.
I was hoping to keep 10 years out of it and give the illusion that we're all 10 years younger than we actually are, but that's all right. We'll roll with it.
I think we should maybe use the word 2 rather than 20. So 2 decades.
That's right. It makes it feel a little smaller, doesn't it?
Indeed.
Look, I'm really looking forward to this conversation today as well. I think we've got perspectives in all of the elements that are going to be critical to making sure that our industry is prepared for what's coming in 2020 and beyond. I've been doing a lot of research myself into the different trends of disruption, and the area of disruption from a customer lens is one that's really interesting to me, because our customers' behaviour, we're already seeing change very rapidly and very consistently, and that's only going to get faster and more disruptive. So let's open the conversation with a little bit of a crystal ball. Let's look into the future moment. Fiona, I'm going to throw to you first. Paint a picture for me of what you think the future of customer contact looks like and where you think the biggest shift is going to occur.
Thanks, Frances. It's a great question. With my crystal ball, and remember I am a little bit of a witchy poo, where are we going to be and what are our customers going to be thinking? Well, we're all customers, so, our job is to put ourselves in our customers' shoes. Have our expectations changed? Oh, yes. And probably because we work in the industry, we're probably the most demanding with the highest of expectations. Our customers are better educated. Is that going to change? Yeah, they're going to be more educated than they are today. So it's an exciting time, because we're going to be customer-led, we're going to be customer-driven, and those that are not actually engaging one-to-one with their customers, personalising, exceeding their expectations without time wasting, being respectful, valuing their customers, are going to be at the forefront for the future.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Greg, what's your thoughts?
Look, it's really encouraging to see that the customer is becoming the king now, finally. The whole history of the industry is, we've been told by corporate affairs and communications people that everything was right. That was the approach to customer service. And then the customers got a voice when iPhones came in and social media. And now your customers, 200,000 of them will tell you and fry your brand overnight if you're not delivering to them what you want, when you want it, through the medium that you want it. So it's been the promise for a long time, but now all the technologies have caught up, and the enterprises are catching up in delivering on that vision. So the vision hasn't changed. It's just now the customers really want it and demand it because they know they should be getting it.
Yeah, look, 100%. And when we were preparing for this, you mentioned that really this is the age that we're stepping into is really just enabling us to deliver on what we've been promising for the last 30 years. And I did some reflection on that afterwards, and you're absolutely right. When I started back on the phones as I won't talk about how old I was, but a very long time ago, all we wanted to do was deliver the best possible customer experience, make it easy, make it simple, and I think we're finally stepping into an age where we can do that really successfully. So that's an exciting prospect for us. Les, what does your crystal ball say?
I think Fiona picks up on a very, very good point, which is that one-to-one relationship. There's been many, many books written about it, and we've been trying to get there for a long, long time. But obviously working for a technology organisation and being in technology for so long, technology is definitely going to underpin that. Finally, in the context of having that one-to-one relationship of understanding, personalising, contextual information, what the customer wants at the particular time, the customer wants that information. And again, one of the other points that I made, customers these days, we're all searchers now, and it really doesn't matter whether we're young kids or whether we're adults now. We are more than capable of using the technology, jumping on the same forums, using ratings. I know for me personally, I'm one for ratings all the time, and if there's sort of 1 out of 5, if you don't have 4+, fair chance I'm moving on to the next one. So understand who I am, interact with me the way I want to be interacted with. Make sure you are using the technology, and we'll certainly get into that a little bit more as we go through in this discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've touched on it a little bit there in terms of the desires of the customer, what the customer wants, but how is that leading to changes in their behaviour, do you think?
Look, the ability to search, it's as simple as that. You know, we're a lot more educated. We're born digital these days, and I'm not talking about me clearly, but my kids, they're born digital. They're born with iPads in their hand these days, so they're more inclined. Goodness me, their phones are welded to their hands. They've got AirPods in their ears now. They are walking around with computers in their hands, and they are doing nothing but searching. Which has a profound effect in the contact centre these days. You know, no longer can we just simply, and Greg would know about this from a recruiting perspective, bring people into the contact centre, you know, do the 2 weeks in training, the buddy system out there. Things are going to change in terms of the skills that you need to help the customers who will interact with you, because eventually they are going to pick up the phone, they are going to chat with you, probably through a social messaging channel. They are going to walk into your shop and eyeball you across the counter, and it's going to be a much more complex interaction, and boy, you better be able to help them.
Yeah, I think even observing my behaviour as a customer, and you touched on it, Fiona, before as well, I am much more educated by the time I get to speaking to somebody. And so my level of frustration has already escalated to a point that, why couldn't I solve this myself? Why do I have to speak to somebody? Why do I have to reach out and initiate that interaction if that's then not given to me in an easy way via the channel that I choose? And I can't chat with somebody and I have to phone or something like that. That's just another layer of frustration. So I'm probably 4 layers of frustration deep before I even get to an interaction. And so that sort of leads nicely into my next question around how the skills required of our frontline people evolve in this world where customers are much more demanding, much more frustrated by the time they get to us. The knowledge interactions that we're having are so much more in-depth and complex. What are we going to need of our frontline people? Fiona?
We're going to need a lot, given that the customers want a lot. So we're looking, and we have been looking for a significant period of time, for people that have emotional intelligence. So people that can walk a mile in their customer's shoes and understand where the customer's coming from. And that's not just empathy, it's so much more than that. We're going to have some further challenges around mental health issues. Not only for our staff members, our fabulous talent, but also the customers that they're interacting with. Our leaders are going to have to be better skilled to identify where there might be challenges for their people, and to know when to intervene and when not to intervene, because it's not all about marching in with your blucher boots on and saying, I'm coming to the rescue, I'm doing it now. Your people are talented and selected because you know they're great at what they do. It's actually knowing when to hold and knowing when to fold, sort of thing. Our leaders are probably going to need to be more technically adept, not necessarily being programmers. And I'm looking at Les now and going, you know, I could
Maybe.
But it's about understanding how things operate and how things work, so that you can speak to your people, but also speak to your customers, because let's face it, things are still going to be escalated to a more senior person in the organisation. And if you don't have that high level understanding, then you can't meet your customers' needs. I think the other thing with the skills relates back to our customers. By the time they've got to you as a contact centre agent, you've already somewhat, as an organisation, disrespected their time.
Yep.
I don't know how many times I say, oh, gee, well, that's 4 hours I'm never going to see again, or whatever it might be. And if I start with that, it's about acknowledging frustration, etc. I think that's going to be really key, so that emotional intelligence is going to be at the forefront.
Absolutely. Interested to hear your thoughts on this too, Greg.
Well, just focusing on the executives, customer experience leadership requires a really broad range of skills, knowledge and attributes, more so than ever before, and it keeps getting added to every year. Back in the old days, it was just, they used to promote them from the team leader to call centre manager, but now CX leaders, in many respects, are coming from outside that pocket. They're coming from other avenues, because everything about CX touches every point of the organisation. So you could come from operations, you could come from finance, you could come from sales, you could come from any number. But you've got to have that understanding of how it all comes together, and not many people have that because they haven't lived through it. They haven't got all the knowledge of the times tables. And you have to have that knowledge, that baseline level to some degree of the times tables. But then on top of that, you've got to have the personal attributes. And with first time we're going to mention the word automation, I'm sure that's going to come up a lot.
We'll play bingo.
Okay, sorry for bringing it up straight away. But the reality is that is changing the whole landscape, of course, and that means it's changing the landscape for the leaders who have to run these increasingly complex environments as well. So in all the research that's coming out, who are the people that are actually delivering results in this really tough environment? They've got on the personal attributes side, skills and knowledge aside, which are pretty easily to identify, but the emotional intelligence is the big one you've already mentioned, Fiona, for sure. But other skills like agility, curiosity, if you think you know everything, that might have worked before in the autocratic management regimes of the past, but now, of course, it's all been turned on its head. Absolutely. So it's a different breed of person. It's almost an argument that if you've come from a traditional environment, or autocratic environment, then it's not going to happen.
Damn.
Collaboration, of course, because you're dealing with so many different environments. You've probably got an outsourced landscape as part of that. You've got a complex system of vendor relationships that have to be managed, and that's across borders as well, through to India, the Philippines, North America. So these people have to be able to communicate and understand the cultural nuances of those organisations, those regions, as well as so you can see how this customer experience equation is grossly underestimated still, but that's the opportunity as well, which we'll talk about later, I think.
Yeah, look, that's a really interesting, and I'm going to go a little bit off script here, but is that, can we get all of those skills in one leader, given that our industry has typically, and as you alluded to, created leaders as people that were great agents that became team leaders, that stepped into ops leader roles or sideways into support roles. The skills that we need them to be very technical, and we also need them to have a high degree of emotional intelligence. They need to have all of these interpersonal skills, and some of those are conflicting to me if I think about putting them into one person. Do we maybe see the role of leadership changing in the contact centre environment in order to meet all of those needs under a different hierarchy and a different structure than perhaps we're seeing today?
There's no one person that has everything. And I don't want to give all my IP away as well.
Oh, come on, asking the tough questions.
And I'm not just saying this because you consult heavily to the workforce optimization discipline, but I will acknowledge that my personal favourite, I think people who come from the workforce optimization discipline have a really good argument for elevation up the org chart, and outside of the contact centre and to broader based CX, because they have to have the personal skills, because they've had to sell all those unpalatable rostering scenarios to team leaders. They have to know the technology to some degree, but they're not too laden with technology, and that's a good thing. If you're too down in the weeds with the technology, then you're missing the business and the customer side of things, and so it's going to be a failure by definition. So there's a few pockets out there, but every environment's different, every company's different, so that answer is different for every appointment.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting thing that will evolve over time on its own. But Les,
Yeah, look, just on those skill sets, I don't know if any of you guys have had a chance to look at the top 15 that LinkedIn has just put out, and it's very much around what you say, Greg. It's all around cognitive, it's analytical learning, it's innovation. Translation was one of them in there as well, which is all around that cultural nuances. So that they're definitely looking for people who they can think on their feet, and they need to be a little bit more innovative, and that's most definitely what's going to change. At an agent level, most definitely at a leadership level. And again, look, if they're out there, they're going to be worth their weight in gold, possibly their weight in platinum these days. But yeah, there's no, I don't believe there's contact center leaders that are going to have all those skills. But certainly, if you go and look up the top 15. That will give you an idea of what is changing and what sort of skills that you need to go and start adapting to. Interestingly enough, and it's stuck in my head, in at number 8 was customer service systems. So it's getting right in there, and customer service systems, without looking into it too greatly, I believe they are talking about the systems, the technology. So we are putting all this together. There is now a massive acceptance that cloud is not only secure, but probably more secure than most organizations on-premise systems. And as they get aged, people are just going to more and more go to the cloud. So again, it's those sort of people that understand cloud, understand technology. No, they don't need to be coders. Fiona, you'll be happy to know. I couldn't code to save myself, but things need to be a lot more simple, and I think you'll find a lot of the technology vendors are working on that. Now, behind the scenes, it might be somewhat complex, but the UI, the UX side of things absolutely needs to be simple to use. The self-service, getting things up and running, if you're not working on that these days, then you're going to fall behind rather quickly.
Yeah, so I think what I'm hearing from Greg and Les is it takes a village. Quite literally, there is no one person. We've identified that. So anyone that thinks they are that one person, they need to put their hand up immediately, because we need to be able to clone them.
That's right.
We'll have a few dollies around, for want of a better term, and take it from there.
Yeah, and look, that does also pose another question that's a little bit off script, but how are we equipping our businesses and our people with that broad range of skills? What is out there to help them gain all of those intricate skills that we perhaps haven't focused on before, and that we're not learning at school? We're not necessarily learning them through any other means. Where are we getting this stuff from?
Here's where I think people have to take responsibility for their own careers. Yeah. I think the organisation, the obligation of the organisation is to be able to provide the opportunity for people to self-map their own career path. But over and above that, everything happens so quickly, everything's so dynamic. You can't expect someone to hold your hand all the way through. I mean, that's just the reality of life in this day and age. Everything's exponential about technology. What took 8 years, 10 years ago now takes 6 months, 9 months in some pockets. So it's a really difficult equation for the enterprise.
Yeah.
To be able to, so I really think people should take, and there's lots of avenues, of course, online learning. There's a myriad of ways in which people can map their own career paths. So yeah, they're out there now. It's up to the individual to take control of their own career.
Yeah,
that's the exciting part about all of this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think the whole concept of that competitive advantage, the duration is getting shorter and shorter. It's so easy just to clone things these days and do what your opposition is doing, which is fantastic for us in the contact center industry, because up to that C level, they are now absolutely understanding that customer service, customer experience is absolutely key. We are in this global society these days. Most products are getting commoditized. The one thing it isn't, obviously, is how you understand your clients. In terms of training, I'd leave that to somebody like yourself there, Greg. Where do you go and get that training? But in terms of us aiding the training, if you like, of our staff, I think that's where knowledge and virtual assistance is going to come into its force. So gone are the days where you can just keep putting people in classroom training. If most people are just like me, we are so busy in our private lives that you can't go to business and just learn. So you need to be aided, especially in this day and age where things are changing so rapidly. So knowledge systems themselves, ably assisted with AI or machine learning, is most definitely going to be put in place as a technology going forward, which is going to help your agents. So not necessarily give them those cognitive skills, but certainly aid them, try and understand what the customer journey is, especially if you've gone through an IVR and stuff like that, or you've done something through social chat, email, for instance. Very, very easy to lift off a subject line. Look at what they've the path they've gone through an IVR. Natural language. Take the natural language words. Very, very easy to just automate that knowledge in front of an agent and say, hey, here's a bit of a leg up. Fair chance this communication is going to be about this. And if we're going to increase customer satisfaction, the two biggest things by far is always going to be that first contact resolution. Just solve my problem. To your point earlier, Francis, I'm very much like you. If I have to call someone, I'm frustrated with me. Why do I have to call someone? I couldn't find it. I couldn't work it out. I'm already frustrated, not with the poor agent, but I'm already frustrated that I've got to, interact with someone. So, boy, please help me, because I'm short in patience these days. So most definitely first contact resolution, and the other one is empathy. Empathy is going to come back into it. That emotional intelligence as well. The more complex the problem, the more you have to understand the client's requirements, and just say to them, I am here to help. Because the days of you doing the simple tasks, they're gone. Like AI, process automation is eating that up. All the simple stuff, gone. You need to be more skilled in how you interact with clients, and you need to have knowledge at your fingertips to help in these complex resolutions now.
Yeah, just one more thing on that, and I think Greg was so right. Your people are responsible for their career paths and for their development, but the other little piece in that puzzle is having the right leader that really drives you and enables and empowers you and almost gives you permission to be the best possible version of yourself, is so critical in making that happen. And many of us around the table, I would imagine, have had leaders like that. And that's why we've been successful, is that our leaders have let us succeed. They've let us fail, but fail in a safe way.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what we need to do as an industry, is provide that safe environment for people going forward.
Yeah, that's an interesting can of worms that's just opened up a whole bunch of pathways in my mind, and so I'm going to go off script again. No surprises there. We've talked about customer is king, and organizations are finally starting to get it, right? People are starting to realize that the contact center is the place that speaks to our customers and has done for the last 20 years. They're the place that has all of the great data and all of this information and all of this customer experience. But I don't know that that's necessarily fully translated yet into a well-funded think tank of a department that is allowed to go out and fail, that is allowed to go out and try things, that's got the free rein to sort of take control of their own destiny and start to figure out what really is going to work for the future of customer experience. I still feel like we're that little bit disconnected as an industry from the corporate of our broader business. Any thoughts? And this is a question, an age-old question that, if we could solve it, we'd probably be on an island in the Bahamas somewhere. But let's open up that can of worms. How do we bridge that gap in this environment where that's absolutely critical? Because to your point, innovation doesn't come from a place of here's the box that you're allowed to play within. It comes from freeing people to explore and be curious and play and learn new technologies and try new things. How do we get there?
I think the contact center industry needs more C-level credibility. And organisations need to appoint, in some cases they have, albeit it's sort of like a half-hearted measure in some instances. It's always been, where does the call centre report on the org chart? The only way you're going to get credibility and visibility is by hiring someone. The organisation hires someone as a direct report into the CEO, so you can argue the case, get the financials across the line to argue business cases for more resources. Outside of that, you're always playing to someone else's fiddle.
Yep.
And that's been the problem of the history of the industry, and it's the opportunity to change now. The call centres are handling the most important part of the whole customer interaction chain, that critical value piece. When you're speaking to someone, you're actually speaking to someone as opposed to an automation channel. So is actually the most important. The industry needs to work out a way to articulate that in the right framework. And that's why I mentioned the workforce optimization people. I'll come back to that again because they argue business cases on very large rostering scenarios, full of thousands of people, tens of millions of dollars. So they've got some pretty good commercial wares about arguing business cases.
Yep.
So again, a whole range of skills that aren't necessarily born and bred out of the call centre industry, which is really siloed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think you see quite a disconnect between what leaders of organisations are saying. I think 80 or 90% of CEOs are saying they're going to differentiate their business based on their customer experience or the customer service. But then what you see when it gets to the front line and how your front line is being measured, there's no connection between what the CEO is saying or the managing director is saying is going to be delivered versus what is being measured. So the measurements drive the behaviours and the outcomes, so they're not the right fit for driving that. So, for instance, being a listening post, English Fiona, or the voice of the customer, you're stifling. And, if your CEO or your senior executives are not in that contact centre on a regular basis, actually listening to what your customers are saying as opposed to what gets reported, which we all know gets diluted by the many layers that it needs to go through. They're not truly hearing the customer voice. And there's nothing more powerful than hearing that.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Statistics are most definitely the key, and we need to obviously capture them, get them to the C-club level, and let them know that we get these complex, which can be the interactions that people decide, I'm going to continue using your business or I'm going to go to someone else. They really are very, very important in interactions. So there's no doubt customer experience is becoming a commercial differentiator. However, there's customer experience agent world, if you like, and then there's customer experience technology. And unfortunately, what we're always going to be competing with is shiny new toys. There's only so much budget to go around, and the person who shouts the loudest in terms of this will have the biggest impact. And clearly, we've got business process automation and AI and machine learning and cognitive. They're all buzzwords that are getting thrown around at the moment. Natural language. If the C Club thinks that the investment in that is where they need to take it, then clearly the money and investment is going to get put into the technology side, which is not necessarily the contact centre arena, if you like, what we understand as a contact centre arena.
So, and it's less and less about the technology these days. As it goes into the cloud, right, the integration is taken care of. Apple does what they have to do, Microsoft does what they have to do to make sure the integration works, all the security measures are in there. So it's about the business application of that technology, and that's why, and that's the opportunity within that landscape for people to step up with that knowledge of how all the customer contact centric people process and technology and finance inputs all come together in that crazy soup in there that has to be managed and nurtured and boiled at the right temperature, Fiona.
Not boiling an ocean.
And I think ultimately what I'm hearing out of that is it's yet another skill that our leaders need to have, right? It's we're sort of creating this magical unicorn leader of a contact centre who knows how to deal with people and get the most out of people across multiple generational differences and all. We might open that can of worms later if we get time, as well as manage upwards with numbers and facts and really sort of hard business cases around the changes that need to be made, as well as create the space, a safe space for innovation and for change and for growth. And there's definitely a big challenge ahead for the leaders in our industry and a big opportunity for those that are ready to step up and start to take ownership of that space.
Most definitely, and hopefully 2020 we can actually see that. I mean, the last couple of years people have put in AI, conversational chatbots and so forth, and it really is to sort of, for the most part, do a lot of those frequently asked questions, simple bookings, confirmation of bookings and so forth, but it's been take away the simple things and let the contact centre staff do what they do best type thing. What we need to do is mature that technologies that we've put in now and actually bring it into the contact centre to allow it to help the agents. And this is what I hope we'll see in 2020, 2021, where you really are getting those machines assisting humans to do their job better, and only give them the information that they need at that particular time.
Yep.
Not bombard them with that useless information, because there's a lot of useless information out there.
And that opens really nicely to the next can of worms that I did want to open, which is around AI and automation. And interestingly, to speak to the point you just raised, Les, there are more and more people putting this technology in. However, as a customer, it is a rare day that I'm actually able to go online to a website and interact with a bot. It might direct my call, it might do the first 0.5% of the interaction, but for any of the brands that I interact with on a regular basis, I haven't seen any of them get to the point where they've deployed an intelligent bot that can actually work with me to solve my problem. So I think we do have that disconnect where, the CEO or the C-suite are going, we need this great new technology. And so we're implementing it just to say that we've done it, but we haven't perhaps opened up its full breadth of capability so that it is a support tool. It is assisting us in removing transactions that don't need to come to us, or troubleshooting things at a first level. Yep. So how do we see that evolving over the next couple of years? What are the opportunities? What are the pitfalls? Who's doing it well? Out to the whole room. Whoever wants to jump in.
So I'm just going to talk very generally about what we're seeing. So we're seeing the tip of the iceberg in terms of what most organisations have done. Some have become gun-shy because they're seeing some poor executions. And I won't mention any brand names about who's done it well and who hasn't done it well, but there are some historical technology implementations where a large telco implemented natural language speech recognition and failed to execute it well, and didn't really understand what was necessary to do it well, and then that made everybody run for cover. So everybody went, you're not going to put in natural language speech recognition? My God, it was an absolute beast of a thing, and it didn't work, and it created more customer issues than customer satisfaction. I think when we're doing those executions and those implementations, a lot of organisations are not bringing the customer in. Mm. They're doing what they think the customer wants with all the best of intentions, and I'm not saying that that's not sitting behind everything they're doing, but you often hear technology people go, we're going to do a sexy implementation, or we're going to do this because, it's on a certain hype cycle or whatever it might be. It's not the right reason to do it. Mm. If your customers are not wanting it or expecting it, you're actually making their exchange or interaction with you worse than it might necessarily be. So quite often when we're getting to that point, we actually want the human touch. So we've got to be a little bit thoughtful about how we go about it, how we implement, bringing the customer in to the design, not after you've designed it, bring them in right from the get-go. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, you're going to get them possibly being a little bit uncertain about how they might be viewed in terms of giving feedback, because you know who they are when they come in to do that. So I think we've got a ways to go.
Yep.
That doesn't mean we shouldn't. It just means we need to be a bit more thoughtful.
Yeah, 100% agree.
Looked at, let's look at what AI, let's get the definition first. We spoke about this briefly in the lead up to today.
Yep.
There's the whole spectrum. You've got robotics at one end, that's taking care of rules-based, basic processes, type interactions, and then at the other end, AI, which is all the algorithms and all the pattern recognition to try and anticipate what the customer might like, etc. So the AI piece is as I support Les on that. It's nowhere near there yet. However, I see the whole robotics AI thing at an inflection point, because it's only about 4 years old here in Australia in its present form, following typically Europe and North America, bigger markets, earlier to market. And it's been sold as a product sale still, as a general statement, and that's a real danger. So we could have a real problem on our hands. There's a potentially big problem on our hands just another CRM, the next version, and next ERP. Everything goes too hard too early, and that's really dangerous now because of the exponential elements of technology. The disasters are going to cost more. A lot of companies could go under if they don't get this right. So it has to be done correctly. But in 2018, 2019, with the years of validation, with a bunch of pilots happening out there, and it's relatively easy to get a pilot to work, but that's not a broad consultation. And we're talking about the enterprise and government market here, right? We're not talking about SMEs, which don't have any legacy systems. They're the ones that I think get this conversation out of control, where you have a Microsoft and an Amazon as a service. All the AI tools are actually built in there, and it does work, but you've only got 15 people in your organisation. When you've got 10,000 people, Telstra, how many Telstra? 30,000 people. It just doesn't work like that. It's not, all the legacy systems, all the different biomes, all the different cultures, all these things, and not to mention the complexity of the customer bases, all the different levels of customer and the profiling there. That has to be done as a really detailed, sophisticated management consultancy exercise, not a one-off pilot that can be stretched out, and because then otherwise, as you know, Francis, you'll hit an exception, and it'll force the bot to break very quickly.
It'll unravel itself very quickly.
And that will be played out 10 times over, and then it just goes like cascades from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Les, any thoughts?
Yeah, look, most definitely. As we said before, what we've done with AI to date is some of the easy stuff, and most organisations have put AI in for cost savings, it is fair to say. The next stage of that, obviously, is the streamlining business processes. That is where they have the potential to get into trouble, clearly. That's not so easy as just taking some easy process and saying, let's automate this, Very, very easy to say, what's your opening hours? And the chat comes back and says, here it is. Right, we've sort of done all that. Most companies have done that. We're looking at that next layer of intelligence where we're asking a question. We're hoping for some form of conversation. The AI is not quite there to do that yet, but the programming is. And I think where there's some sort of trouble happening at the moment is people are entering into these projects without really knowing how much work you actually need to do in the back end. And at the moment, and look, don't get me wrong, I'm fascinated with AI. I think AI is wonderful, and I look forward to seeing how it progresses. But at the moment, we just have to temper what it can and cannot do. By all means, you can go and spend millions and millions of dollars and get some of the very sort of deep thinking AI. That's not really what's commercially available to most organisations. And if you're paying, $100, $150 for a license, I'm going to tell you, going out on the limb, you're not really getting a lot of AI here. You're getting what's called weak AI.
Can I just ask a question sort of related? Les, what's the penetration of cloud out there across the landscape? I find it hard to get a straight answer to that, because that's going to be the precursor, right? Once you've got everything in the cloud, then it makes it easier to start laying the platform for true AI implementation. What's your sense?
In terms of what systems are you talking about?
Well, just a general...
who's moved, how much has moved to the cloud? Look, a lot has... I don't have the statistics. A lot have moved to the cloud, gradually, and people have moved applications of what they call workloads to the cloud. And they've been doing that for 10 years or so. But some of the larger applications, especially financial applications, and even some of the contact center applications, quality applications, whilst the cloud's been around for a while, we're only really seeing some reasonable technology putting out by the vendors where people are starting to take their journey to the cloud now. And if you look at most of the RFPs that are coming out these days, they're all asking for cloud. The first responses from most of the vendors, when they get to ask questions, is, will you accept a premise-based solution or a hosted solution? And quite frankly, the answer is normally yes, put it all in. But the way it's being said back to these organisations is, what? Please don't waste your time. people are moving to the cloud at a rapid rate. What the stats are at the moment, as I say, I don't know, but I can assure you in 12 months' time, it will be the majority. There's no doubt about that. Every single RFP desires a cloud solution for all the obvious reasons. It's so easy to upgrade. Deployment is rapid. It is more secure. The APIs are so much better. The interconnectivity is so much better. You don't necessarily have to maintain it. It's all done by the vendor these days. Interoperability is a lot easier. There's so many reasons to move to the cloud.
I think part of the challenge that I've seen in people making those cloud leaps is that there's typically at least one legacy system. You don't change all of your technology at once, right? You don't go, I'm going to put in new telephony, new knowledge, just to, wipe the slate clean and start fresh. And so sometimes the connectivity between those legacy-based systems that have been designed for that particular organisation's business process make it difficult for that interconnectivity to happen. And then the scope of configurability and customization in a cloud-based application is always that little bit below, and purely because we're operating on a universal platform with a universal set of skills, and so to customize this little bit doesn't just change it for me, it changes it for every user globally. In some applications. And I think sometimes we're still stuck in that this is the way our business does things, and we're not ready to change the way we do things to fit the technology. I don't think we've yet got that mindset, because what we see from a consulting perspective time and time again is transformations failing because we're not willing to adapt our business around the tools that we're hinging our success on. So again, off topic, but any insights or reflections on that as a discussion point?
You're correct insofar as a lot of the cloud solutions are maybe not as feature rich as some of the premise-based solutions, which have been in development for many, many years. There will be an inflection point. Some of the applications obviously reach that. What will happen, though, is once you get to that inflection point, the cloud solutions, because of how they're architected, it's so easy to push new functionality out. It is so much harder to push new technology or new functionality, if you like, out into old software, sort of monolithic stacked software, because there is that much testing that you need to do to bring it out. You're always going to have these quarterly, half-yearly cycles. These days with some of the architecture, especially around micro technologies, you are just putting something out basically every day if you so desire, and that's really why people are moving to the cloud. New functionality is coming out every day, and you're getting the benefit of that, and it's part of your maintenance package. You don't pay any more for it. Gone are the days where commercially you got to go back to the procurement guy and say, hey, we want an additional feature that's going to cost us X. We're just getting new features every day, and that's wonderful. But it's wonderful for organisations. It's great for vendors to be able to do that, and do that really, really quickly without doing all the regression testing we used to do.
Les, you raised some really good points about why people are going to the cloud. And when I reflect on when cloud was being first spoken about more than a decade ago, they were all the reasons not to go to the cloud, so that you don't need IT people. The IT people were going, well, what about me? Those sorts of challenges that you had. So there was a lot of focus on legacy systems and needing to maintain them, and the security of having it on premise, and all of those sorts of barriers that you've now said are the reasons why people are taking that opportunity. Agility's got to be one of the best things about it, how dynamic it is. For instance, you think about the bushfires that we've just been through in the last 3 months, or since September of 2019. If you only had an on-premise solution, you are absolutely stymied by what you can do there. But in the cloud, you can bring your resources in, your casual workforce, and the sky's the limit.
Absolutely.
Working from home, better quality people with more focus, higher retention, lower absenteeism rates, all of the real positives that it brings. So I think if we limit our thinking, then that's what we're going to get.
Mm,
At the end of the day, I'll get excited by it, and seeing what people are doing in the workplace around changing the focus from, well, this is the way you work, to this is who you are, and then you layer work around who you are. So what are your values? What is it you want? And let's see how we can deliver it together.
Yeah. Look, these days as a vendor, there is nothing so just put it out there, customers, nothing so soul destroying as presenting new technology and someone saying, can we just do it the way we've done it before? It's maybe a scoping exercise you need to look at there, because no, you shouldn't do it the way you've done it before. That technology these days, it's what it offers is so exciting in terms of the scalability and the functionality and how quickly you can get new functionality out. It's, everyone should be embracing this. It's going to enrich everyone's life.
So if we take that one step further, there's hopefully, so I think there's some more skills to be built in terms of innovation, creativity, and the agility in ourselves to enable us to adopt this cloud-based movement that allows us to change rapidly. We need to be constantly then looking for, hey, there's this new deployment of functionality. How are we going to use that to better our business? And there's almost a continuous improvement function that needs to sit behind that in order to continually make the most of the technology that we have. And that's a whole mindset shift and a skills-based shift, but we've already delved a little bit into that. I'd like to cast our eyes a little bit further forward into the future. What future technology that's still in development, that's not yet really invented yet, or not yet having an application in a contact center environment, what future technology do we see impacting our industry?
I don't know about the future, future, but we're already talking about AI not being ready yet, so that's the future technology is not ready, really.
Yep.
You look at that same LinkedIn jobs report that Les referenced, all the jobs, that's off the biggest sample size on the planet. So LinkedIn has about 500 million registered users. In Australia, I think they've got about 10 or 12 million people. So that's incredible, and it's real time. So, and it was amazingly uniform right across the globe that the highest demand was for robotics engineers, AI people, data scientists, customer success people. It was good to see customer success with the vendors actually investing post-implementation, because they know that it's not going to, if it doesn't work, that's in no one's interests.
Yep.
You don't get a second chance. But the big one in terms of the future technology is still robotics, because it's so new. 70% of total labour costs, of total costs in a company are labour.
Yep.
And across the board, across all industry sectors. So this is one way that the call centre, the contact centre industry, very labour intensive, can argue strong business cases and get more credibility at C-levels that talk in those terms. And enterprise resource management is coming out of Deloitte's reports that I read as being the big opportunity with that technology, because whilst a whole job in isolation hasn't been automated yet, just component parts of it have been. That's why we haven't seen, and I don't know what the answer is in terms of what the impact is going to be on jobs, which is the next question on from that. But so far it hasn't seemingly impacted that much on jobs. Let's see where that goes. But if they don't go to the cloud, then they're not going to be quick enough to respond to what they have to do in the next 2 years, because the nature of work is going to change fundamentally. This is the fourth industrial revolution. We've all heard about it. It is real. It's here. It's been here for about 2 years in its modern form. And now 2020 and beyond is about enterprise rollout to production. You can't do that if you're not in the cloud. And that means a radical rethink, which they're doing now. I mean, right down to the position descriptions and the skill sets that you need. And then how does that roll out, and what kind of technologies are they going to be needing? So robotics helps do all of that, because robotics is forcing that, because it's able to take out and automate a lot of the component parts of each position description.
Yep.
But again, ably supported by analytics. I think the word actionable intelligence has been bandied around for many, many years, but advanced analytics, data science these days is all under that AI umbrella, and it's that coupled with the robotics that's going to say, unbelievable change in all industries, not just the contact center industry. At the moment we've got robotics in cars where they're very much programmed to do one job. Put these rivets in this place. Don't even think about it, type thing. But when we start giving them intelligence to sift through so much data that as human beings we simply cannot, it's not sustainable, and we're not actually consistent at it either. They take all that away. Once you start putting the advanced analytics into applications globally, whether it is manufacturing, whether it's customer care, whether it's health these days, as they're doing a lot with AI in health, in terms of sifting through so much data and saying, to the best of our ability, here is the likely diagnosis or prognosis. So again, that's what excites me about AI. It's all the data that we've got. We can now actually do something with very, very quickly and come up with answers. And without broadening the conversation too much, AI and the advanced analytics really have got the potential to change the planet, and hopefully for the better.
Can I just ask one other question of Les, because there's two schools of thought out there. Do you need the integrity of the data to get the best out of AI? Do you need to have it all mapped out and have 100% integrity, or, which I think is sort of part of the proposition of AI sales executives, saying you actually don't need the integrity of the data because you'll have patterns, and it's about identifying patterns, and you really don't need to do all that cleanup?
Yeah. So probably two ways to answer that. One is, from a pure AI perspective, I think we obviously need to program it to take out the negatives, what do they call them, double negatives,
the anomalies, and
these type of thing. That there should be hard data or sufficient data that says, here's the trend. You're always going to have outliers. It's getting rid of those outliers and saying here is really what the data is telling us. The other side of that, I guess, is, and we are not going to be as smart as computers. I mean, let's face it, we're just not. That's why we're allowing them to do what they're doing. Hopefully, we've got them programmed that they're not going to destroy the earth or destroy us, type that thing. Don't laugh, because these things are so much more clever than we are. They learn, they sift through data so much more than we do, and that's why we're obviously using them. So at the moment, though, I think we'll look for AI to come up with the data or the answers. Humans are still going to sift through that. We'll get lots of very, very clever people going through that and saying, yeah, look, that's probably right. In the next few years, we won't even understand what these things are doing. We've already had examples of, robots talking to robots, us programming and saying, talking this certain way, and then they just go and make up their own language because it's more efficient. We've got no idea what they're saying. Yeah. Not to scare anyone, but, that's a real case. So it's something we have to watch, but done properly, AI, robotics, advanced analytics, just exciting stuff.
It absolutely is, and I think it alludes to what contact centres have been about for years. Which is the coming together of science and art. Mm-hmm. And we've been saying that, I've been around for more than 2 decades, shall we say. But it's been something that we've always spoken about. We did it with workforce management, workforce optimisation, and we go that through. It always needs, and I'm going to come back to it, that human touch. Science is great, the data is great, but someone's got to make a judgment call. Whether those trends are making sense, whether the patterns are making sense, or whether what the data is telling you, and this is where we get to that tension point, is whether what the data is telling you is where the company wants to go strategically, and does it support the strategic direction? Because we will have some organisations that go, oh, that's not what our strategic plan says, so, we'll just push that under the carpet until we're ready to do it, which means we're not listening. Mm-hmm. And all that effort and all of that wonderful technology is for naught.
Yeah, I think in some cases we might not be ready to listen.
Absolutely.
Yeah, love it, Les.
Absolutely. And I think the exciting thing I've been diving into recently is the combination of where we take the great technology and all of the intelligence that it brings and the human touch and we blend those more successfully. Right now we live in a world where we switch between human interaction and digital interaction. I can sit here and have a conversation with you, or I can pick up my phone and have a conversation with you, but via a digital means. Those two things don't currently intersect today. I can't do, we don't multitask well as humans in that context. What I'm really excited about is starting to see where spatial computing takes us in creating that blend, right? Imagine the days where, how many, put your hands up out there in the audience, how many people still have, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks in classroom training combined with sitting side by side, and great knowledge and knowledge platforms can help shorten that, but only to a certain degree. There's a level of foundational knowledge that's necessary in order to get on the phone and speak to a customer, or get on a chat and speak to a customer, or whatever iteration of that. But if we start to move that forward, where we're wearing a headset or a pair of glasses that in real time steps us through the technical things that I have to do on the system and updates itself intelligently in order to shorten that training cycle to perhaps a day of induction about who we are and how you're expected to behave, that can be done remotely. And you can literally, we may one day see the day where you can literally sit on the beach and answer your customer inquiry with a set of goggles and a set of headphones.
Les does that now.
He's actually
So do
on
I, in
the beach.
Whilst driving.
But that's the stuff that really excites me, finding that blend between the digital and the human, and making it more integrated than it is today, and hopefully therefore creating that seamless, easy, smooth customer experience that will result. So that's my future technology prediction. So moving on to our next sort of topic is I'm going to skip past a couple of questions here and come back to today, because we do only have a few minutes left. So in sort of wrapping it up, what do we think today's contact centres most struggle with, and what barriers will they need to overcome to prepare what's to come? Final thought from everybody.
Oh, we're looking at me. Well, there you go, because I'm the guru. So what are they struggling with? Because we're mainly driven by people, interacting with people, it's people. And dare I say, people are a positive and a negative, mainly a positive. I think my glass is more than half full about the people that work in the industry. They're fabulous. What are we going to provide for them? How are we going to allow them to innovate, evolve, grow, succeed, as we said earlier, be the best possible version of themselves, and overlay the technology into the environment? Now, that doesn't mean that their jobs are not going to change. Their jobs are going to change, but they're probably going to be more exciting and more interesting, and use other sides of their brains and other sides of who they are. And we're going to get the whole person, not just the bit of the person that comes to the office or comes to their workstation at home, which I think is, I'm going to say, it's super sexy ultimately, and I wish I was going to be around for that next bit. But the biggest thing that most contact centres struggle with, and this is the saddest thing about the people aspect, is they struggle with trusting their people.
Absolutely.
And that's terrifying, because you trust them to talk to your customers, you trust them to send messages via whatever channel it happens to be. But for many organisations, the trust stops the minute you leave the office. Why? I don't metamorphose into my evil twin sister the minute I walk out the door. Or maybe I do. My husband would probably say I do. But we don't do that. We're the whole person when we're there, and we're the whole person when we're not there. So I think that's probably the biggest thing, is the trust between human beings and organisations and human beings.
Yeah, and I don't think that's specific just to the contact centre either. I've had conversations of a similar nature with small business owners and with people across any silo of the organisation. I think it's a human challenge, not just a contact centre operational one. But very, very well put, Ms. Fiona. Thank you. Pleasure. Any other thoughts?
Sort of back to my point before, a comment more about the contact center industry. I think it just undersells itself. It doesn't know how good or important it is. And, on the one hand, CEOs are saying, oh, customers are our most important asset. And then people, with the people that sort of service that customer, well, here are your frontline people. So, but yet you don't give them anything. You have them reporting into a director of sales, or you give a call center operations manager a sign-off authority of about $15,000 or whatever, something along those lines.
Yep.
It's nowhere near commensurate with the importance. If they really think that's important, then the contact center industry needs to argue that case. And it's also good from a career progression standpoint, because if they are touching the customer, they're in charge of the most important raft of technologies out there on the planet in the enterprise and government market. So they're best placed to take on a lot of these customer success roles and some of the technology centric roles, if they're that way inclined, that LinkedIn was saying and is saying are the jobs of the future. Yeah. So they're really well positioned, but again, they just don't know how good they are. They need to be dug out and say, hey, get more aggressive, whatever whatever the right word is, get out there and speak to your CEO and say, when I'm speaking to a CEO, I actually don't talk about the contact centers. I try and use a consumer experience. I ring up firstly as a customer. So I think that's the most powerful thing.
Yep.
It's not a consultant speaking. It's not a manager talking about how well their call center staff are doing. It's a real litmus test of where your organisation is at. And it's still not great as a general statement.
Yep.
Part of that is because consumer expectations are so much higher now. You don't want to be transferred to someone in the Philippines. It's a great outsourced industry. They do a fantastic job, but they're like, for instance, some of the organisations just won't have a level of authority for that person to solve the problems. They can't solve the customer, and then their only recourse is to escalate it to their team leader when the customer complains, who has the same level of authority, and just make you even more aggravated along the lines you were saying before.
Yeah, which comes back to the trust issue, right? It all kind of circles back.
So there's my 2 cents worth. I really think it needs to step up. I've seen it. It's still where it was in that sense from 20 years ago that I've been associated with the industry. It hasn't, so it needs a few people to step up and do it. And I think the technology, people like Les and Fiona and yourself are part of that process.
Let's hope so. Thanks. Les, final thoughts?
Final thoughts. Look, I think the contact centre people are generally stepping up. I think the level of intelligence is always growing in there. People do empathise more. I see more training in that side. I'm always happy to say that there's more training needed in that side. As I say, gone are the simple tasks. If you think you're going to have 2-minute calls these days, you're just not. And going forward, there's going to be less and less and less. So you are going to need to empathise with clients. And that's a soft skill. Agents, team leaders, managers, they're just going to have to get used to that. And again, that is really why they're looking for those type of innovative cognitive skills going forward. From a technology perspective, there is that many omni-channel RFPs out there at the moment. So we've had multi-channel for a long time, and we've had the email group and the voice group were different. Then we tried to mesh them a little bit. The whole concept of omni is all around actually having knowledge of what's happening in another channel and even moving between channels. So someone starts in a chat, wants to go to video, that type of thing. So the days of having the separated agent pools, they're gone, right? So maybe be a little bit more aware of change management as you bring technology in. You simply cannot say to agents, right, from here on in, you might do a social chat today, a voice tomorrow type thing. You're virtually going to do it on the same call going forward. So get used to that. Knowledge is coming in. People cannot keep training. And as I say, I think from an omni-channel and a change management perspective, there's going to be enough training in technology. You need to sort of look at how are you going to assist your agents going forward. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges. And, without it sounding too biased, knowledge is most definitely going to play a big part in that. And I think organisations are starting to recognise that. And certainly vendors ourselves and many of the other ones are recognising that. How easily can you put relevant and personalised knowledge in front of humans to help them?
Yeah, so that's definitely a big challenge for a lot of organisations to solve. Unfortunately, we're out of time, and as I predicted, we could probably sit here for another 2 hours and go down all of these rabbit holes, and maybe we will after we're off air. But I'd like to thank you all very much for participating in this conversation today. Hopefully our listeners have taken a few little tidbits away, and hopefully we can...